Hello, MotoAmerica fans. Welcome to this latest edition of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. I am Sean Bice, and I'm joined by our communications manager, Paul Carruthers. And we have a special guest today for sure. I know we say that with some people we have on, but man, the number of episodes we've had of this podcast, and we haven't had this guy on. Tony Romo, senior road race tire technician for Dunlop motorcycle tires. I shouldn't say even USA. I think it's international. It's global, isn't it, Tony?
No. I think you were correct the first time. It's basically
Okay.
USA. I mean, we do, we do some business with our sister companies and on a global level, but pretty much I'm here in the USA.
Okay. Yeah. And Tony, I mean, Tony goes back a ways. Tony's done a lot in the road racing and motorcycle industry. He's actually an incredible mechanic, engine builder. When I first got to know him, he was with Yamaha back in the day and was part of that crew. And then grew up and is from Southern California, and now he lives in Buffalo. So,
Ouch.
Well, I think it's awesome. I love it. Actually, Tony, I don't know if you know the answer to this. This is a question I wasn't planning to ask you, but do you know why Dunlop is in Buffalo?
That's a good question. I mean, the factory's been here for over 100 years, and that's just, it worked. I think it was a lot of power, resources, and proximity to Canada, so you can import, export, and that kind of stuff. So I think that was a long time ago, but yeah, it's still working. We're part of the community, so yeah, I think they like it.
Yeah, and I wondered, does it have anything? I mean, it's interesting. I grew up in New York State, and now I live in Ohio. But I go by, so I go by. I don't go right by your place, but I go by, where Dunlop is, and then I go right by Akron, where Goodyear and all that is too. So, or at least still has a presence there. Do you think the fact that they were in Akron and are in Akron has something to do with that proximity, or do you think that's just a coincidence?
Yeah, I mean, maybe, Akron and that Akron, Ohio, it is the hub for the tire manufacturing. I mean, it seems like every tire manufacturer has a hub or a big building there. And when we were co-owned by Goodyear, we had a partnership with Goodyear. We did go there quite a few times a year, and we did collaborate on a few projects. But I'd say probably 4 or 5 years ago, we broke off from Goodyear, and now we're a standalone Sumitomo Dunlop company. So yeah, the big presence of heavy rubber industry in Ohio, Akron area.
So Paul, I mean, we got to go back to talking about Tony when he was like, well, I don't know if he was a neighbor of yours, but at least he was out in your neck of the woods anyway, back there. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, how'd you get started in all this, Tony?
Sure. And it's funny, I probably told the story a bunch of times, and I apologize. I get long-winded. I swear I will not pull every single name and get into detail. But yeah, basically, pretty organic. I didn't have any, like my dad or my cousins or brothers or any of that were really into motorcycles. It was 70s, 80s, and motorcycle was very popular. You could see them on the street, and you can, I still remember when I saw my first MB5, it was cool, and just the sound, the two-stroke sounds were cool, and so it was pretty organic. I just wanted to do that. My brother did get a motorcycle that got me into motorcycles, and then just having to repair them. So that we couldn't afford to take them anywhere. We had to do it all ourselves, and but that got us into a vocation that motorcycling was probably what I wanted to do. I wanted to get in that. I wanted to make that my career. So you started a dealership and learned a lot of stuff there. And then one of the guys raced and said, why don't you come to my race? And for people that didn't grow up in the Southern California, Willow Springs was a big one. I feel bad for people that didn't have a Willow Springs back in the day, because they raced once a month. It was packed, and it was just a cool road racing culture. And so once you went there, you got addicted quick. So that's basically how it started. I went to see the races, and I thought, okay, I can do this. There was a lot of motorcycles that needed maintenance and proper preparation, and I felt that I could make a difference there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, you were a Yamaha employee for several years, worked for them, and I don't know if that's what. Well, before you, was that the last, I guess, OEM situation, race team situation you had before you went to work for Dunlop? And how did the Dunlop opportunity come up?
Yeah, I mean, it was a long time to get to Yamaha. Just a quick progression of the thing is, like I said, getting back to Willow Springs, you could, if you, what made that special as well was if you could show that you could be proficient mechanic, and at that point you would do everything. You'd be the truck driver, the cheerleader, the mechanic, everything, from running the pit board to making lunch to making sure the bike didn't run out of gas, and you could get on a factory team back then. I know quite a few guys that went to factory Honda, Yamaha, and Vance and Hines and stuff like that. So, slowly kind of progressed there, but really the Yamaha opportunity happened after I came back from Europe. I did a couple of years in World Superbike with Muzzy Kawasaki, and when I came back, luckily, that's a funny story, is I was at the GNF. I was at a road race at the end of the year, and I talked to Earl Hayden, and he said, "Hey, Tommy just got picked up by Yamaha, and it's a super sport 600, super sport 750 deal, and they're looking for a one guy that can do everything. And what do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, that sounds great." And I knew Tom Houseworth, and he worked there. He was the kind of the main guy, him and Tom Halverson. So um, it was pretty easy. I got to be honest with you. I mean, Earl kind of teed it up for me, and it was easy for me to get there. That was in 2009, I think. And I worked there for 11 years. It was a long run. Then after that, there was kind of an economic situation, 2008. So there were some cuts, and unfortunately, I was part of that. But I was able to land on my feet. Ben Bostrom was super instrumental, and he was working on another team, Pat Clark Racing. People might remember that. So that was really good. We were able to just transition onto that. Still stayed with Yamaha, still had factory support. And then at the end of I think at the end of that first year, there became opportunities. Opportunities were available here at Dunlop, and I just wanted more stability and security, kind of thing. And I kind of wanted to change of pace too. I think I could contribute something different that they didn't have, and yeah, so that's how it worked out. That was in end of 2010, I think, and I've been here ever since.
Long time.
Yeah. Yeah. That transition. I mean, it's funny because you really, Tony, are a nuts and bolts kind of guy, engine builder. And I'm not saying that tires aren't, but tires a component on a motorcycle. What was the curve like for you? How was your knowledge of tires going into that whole thing?
It was very basic, I mean, exactly what as a mechanic, just compounds, and checking for out around and balance, and making sure that you're trying to get the right tire at the right time. But it was pretty basic. Luckily, when I spent the time in Europe, um, as my tire technicians, I had one of the main designers of NTEC. So I had the late Dave Watkins. He was very good for me, and would take the time to explain to you about tire and the construction. And Mark Sears, again, the late Mark Sears, he would sit down, and if you're interested, they would take the time. And so I was interested in tires, and they really spent a lot of time with me. And then when I came here, he ended up being, my boss was Mick Jackson, and he's one of our techs now. He still comes to most of the races, and he's another one. He'll take a lot of time and explain everything. So yeah, my knowledge was pretty basic, but luckily they really want to pass on that knowledge. It is tribal knowledge, so it helps out quite a bit.
Now, when you started in the tire business, was it already spec tire or not for the series?
Yes, it was. But at
Okay.
that time, we had the UK product. So for
Right.
Superbike, we ran UK product, NTEC. Everybody just calls them NTEC. And then for these, what do they call it? DMG call it Sport Bike,
Right. Daytona Sport Bike or something.
Daytona
Yeah.
Sport Bike. We had our DOTs at that point, so we would run those. Those were US made, and then the slicks were UK made.
And now, obviously, since MotoAmerica started, Wayne wanted slicks in all classes, and that's currently what we have.
Yeah.
Is that work out okay for Dunlop to do that, or would they rather have DOT classes?
No, I think that was better, because globally that's what you see. I mean, Moto 2, and it seems like every super sport class was going in that direction. And that's one of the things, and I can't speak for other tire brands, but typically it's the same tire. It's the same green tires, we'd call it. And then you just put it in a DOT mold or in a slick mold.
Mhm.
So that's why sometimes people weigh them and they go, well, I don't understand. The DOT doesn't weigh any less than the slick. And you're like, that's correct, because it's the same green tire. So it simplified our production, made it easier for us to load. We carry less tires. And so I think globally it was going that way. So I think we were okay with that. And I think I think that was a good call there.
Yeah, I mean, if a kid's gonna race, he's gonna eventually ride on slicks. He might as well start on slicks and know nothing but slicks, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, well, Talent Cup next year, those Kramer bikes are going to obviously be on slicks too. I think those have 17-inch wheels on them anyway, so it's not,
Mhm.
it's gonna work out for everybody on that. It's interesting about, because we talk about back in the day when we had some DOT tires that were raced on, and I mean, tire technology has advanced a lot since then, but and the rubber technology too, but it's something that people don't really understand, Tony, is, they these round black things, I
Mhm.
mean, we have tires on our cars and tires on our motorcycles. It's not, it's an ongoing science to continue to develop what grip, durability. I mean, it's you guys are always chasing something, right? I mean, there's a perfect tire hasn't really been invented yet. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, it's funny. Sometimes people will say, "How come we have the same compounds? We haven't changed compounds." It's not that we're not trying. Um, we try, I mean, probably 5 or 6 different compounds a year, and we'll go and test. We have our test track at Huntsville Proving Grounds. Taylor Knapp, once he got on board, we really kind of accelerated that, and that's been really good for us. But it's a lot of times it's hard to improve on what we have. The other thing is, what people don't understand is that I get a lot of perfect examples mid Ohio. So they say Ben Spies went 23.6 or something in 2008, maybe 2006. And so why are we not, the bikes are faster. We have TC. Well, yeah, there's a lot of EPA stuff involved, right? You can't put some of the polymers and components and some of the chemicals that you could use then, you can't use that now.
Hmm.
So you're still trying to get the same speed, or you're trying to advance, but you're still trying to be EPA friendly. And that's what people don't get. Like you said, you put the tires on your car. When you wear the tire out, it's almost like this fine dust. You don't see chunks everywhere, but that all goes into the groundwater. It rains and then it goes into your groundwater, or it goes into the sewers, and they don't want chemicals. And I think we're okay with that. And we're constantly trying to we're a zero to landfill company. Everything that we do here, nothing goes to landfill. I think they tear all the metal out and then they grind the stuff up and go to playgrounds or some kind of non-slip stuff for paint or something like that. But so those are the challenges. That's what we're trying to do. So yes, we're always striving to use alternative components and polymers and resins, and but it's very hard to come to improve on what we have right now.
Okay, easier is probably not the right word, but is it easier on the tire manufacturers with the amount of traction control, or does that not make a difference?
Um, No, I think it's no. You're always, yeah. You give them more grip, they're just gonna turn up more TC. I think that's something that I didn't realize going into this thing. Is when I stopped working on motorcycles, we had TC, but not the corner to corner stuff they can do now. And then as they can modify it on the buttons, they can put more TC as the race goes on. Um, and so you kind of see that. I mean, if I don't know if they do it on pressure to rise, but a lot of times you'll right from the first session, you just hear, no matter what team I've worked with, they always like too much power here, cut power here, too much there. And you give them more grip, they're just going to put more power in.
Right.
So it hasn't made it easier, for us. They still maximize no matter what we do. They're always going to max. The bikes make so much horsepower now. They cut a lot of power, and I think that's one thing people don't get. They think these guys are just 1-to-1 throttle, and it's 200 horsepower all the time, and that's just not the case.
Tony, little bit of a, I don't know if this is geometry or whatever this is, but real basic question. Is the contact patch on the rear of a Dunlop tire bigger than it used to be, or is it the same as it's always been, about the size of a dollar?
I would say it's pretty much the same. I mean, we do have bigger tires, right? And then obviously it's all about the tire pressure. kind of as a rule of thumb, but it's not exact, is, we'll say for 1 PSI that you increase, you'll lose approximately 5 millimeters of contact patch.
Oh, okay.
So yes, we going from, say, when we first started from a 255, 260, 265, we're kind of stretching that contact patch a little bit every time we do that. But then you want to be careful because you don't want to affect the handling of the bike. Sure, we have more grip, but the rear tire steers it just as much as the front tire. And so that's what we'll get, like a stand up. We'll go, okay, it's good on the braking, you throw it in the corner, and then all of a sudden the bike wants to stand up because it's just too tall in the back. Or it's too flat, they're running too low pressure and the thing wants to fall over. So yeah, that's I'd say it has increased, but not by leaps and bounds by any means.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, you can only do so much with. I mean, obviously you said the tire's bigger, the width of the wheel or whatever, and it's 17-inch wheels. We had somebody. This is coming out of nowhere. We had somebody on, I don't know, one of the forums or whatever, saying that a team had a different diameter wheel on the back of their bike. And I'm like, how could you even do that? Even if somebody had a 6, it's all got the bead is the bead, Yeah. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, you can't make changes like that.
No, and the tire wouldn't fit. It wouldn't beat up. If it was too small, it would spin real easy on the wheel. If it was any larger in diameter, it wouldn't beat up. And so, no, and I mean, you see that a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons that we don't go on some of these podcasts that have live questions, because someone's always trying to bait you and troll you into saying something, and there's just so much misinformation out there. So yeah, no, that's I've never seen that.
It's why I try to keep Sean off chat rooms, but it's an impossible task.
Yeah, you're always going to lose.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about a little bit about Mid-Ohio, and I'm going to preface this a little bit, Tony. So we all very much were thrilled to be back at Mid-Ohio. I think all of us agree that it's a track we all love. It's a storied track. And one of the codicils about MotoAmerica is that we will only race on a track that you can race on in the rain. So on the Thursday test day, we didn't have any rain to test that out. And then we got rain over the weekend, but we got the kind of rain that it kind of came and then it went. And the issue there is we do race in the rain and we race in the dry, but the tricky thing is a track that it had recently rained on and it's drying out, or a track that, has dried out. And I don't know if the usage of it, we have a rain tire, we have a slick. Back at one point, there was an intermediate tire of some sort. I don't know if that is for that kind of thing, if that's something that would help, or how do you solve that? Because ultimately we got all the races in, although we did have to change it to Sunday. So there's kind of a little bit of a qualification of that racing in rain, or racing rain or shine. Sometimes it's not just rain or just shine. So can you talk about that a little bit and how you guys handle all that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is track drainage, right? It really comes down to the track. That's the number one thing. That's the limiting factor. What we see, so we don't do intermediates. The only place where we wanted to offer something in the intermediates, and we do bring the Q5 to some of the faster tracks. So, for example, MotoAmerica, if it's a drying track, it will literally rip the center of the tire off of a rain tire. There's just no rain tire that's strong enough to put up with that. So we'll bring Q5s to that because you're 190 miles an hour, and that's difficult. If it's full wet, we really don't have a problem. But the drainage kind of what you saw last year, say like at New Jersey, the track was completely dry. It was ready for slicks, except for the river running down across turn 1 there. And that really made everybody go with rains. So when we went away from intermediates, we kind of went with a little more durable rain. And it puts up with almost everything. I can tell you now, Larry Pegman would be a true testament when he finished 3rd on a drying track on the rain tires, and they really didn't look too bad at the end of the race. So that's what we did. We shifted to a little more durable compound for the rain tire. eliminated the need for the intermediate, but at really high speed tracks, I think we're still going to try to bring something, at least for superbike, maybe even for baggers, um, just to make it safer, for this, because it will tear the center out if it starts to dry.
All right, I see you a lot on pit lane, hot pit, because I'm walking up and down during the sessions, and you're camped out there at Ducati HSBK at this point.
Mhm.
How does it work? Like, how do you pull names out of a hat? How do you get that team, and how does this guy get Yamaha and this guy get this team? And I think every superbike, I'm not sure if all the superbike teams have their own guy. Explain that a little bit and how that works.
Yeah, I mean, we get that question a lot. So, uh, let's see. I probably have about on average, I have 3 other technicians, and sometimes our tire designer will come as well. And we'll get a couple people, that'll kind of make a cameo appearance. We try to get them to kind of the big races, Daytona, places where we need all hands on deck. The more eyes, the better. But typically, there's going to be 3 other technicians and myself. And we try to cover the top teams. Not that we're not available for everyone else. I mean, but as far as how we choose the team, we kind of pick a team, and then I'll kind of assign the technician to that team. And a lot of it's about personality.
Mhm.
A lot of it is how does that technician gonna gel with that team? Because some of the guys are a little more technical, some of the guys are a little more um, they don't really care about that. They just want to say, hey, listen, this is what I recommend, and they're just going to go with that. They don't need a lot of justification. So the techs are a little bit different. I've been with Ducati for 3 years, so probably next year I'll swap over to another team. Um, because and we'll do that. We typically about every 3 years we'll move everyone around. And it's almost at random, or we'll kind of talk about it and see if this rider moved over there, and how are the technicians going to be most useful, because sometimes a real technical technician is just not going to be the right fit for a team that's a little more passionate, you know.
Right.
And that's kind of where we are on the Ducati side. They're more a little passionate kind of people, and they're a little more family oriented, and I don't think a more technical person would be a good fit there.
So, obviously, back in the day, there was Michelin, there was different tire manufacturers, so you had that competition. I
Mhm.
would think this way you have it set up would be kind of cool too, because you can like compete against your other Dunlop guy in a way, right? Because you got your team and he's got his team. Does it work that way at all, even though it
Uh,
is just one big company?
in the past, it kind of did. In the past, because we had technicians that were from the UK, right? So they would kind of fly in and do their thing and then leave. And then, yeah, there was a little bit of, you know, secrecy there, or maybe some favoritism. But we don't have that problem anymore. And actually, we can't do that, because now everything's digital, right? So we all have these iPads, and all of the data gets shared live time. So I don't even have to call anyone on the radio anymore to see what tire someone else is on. We all share that data, but we don't divulge that data to the other teams, right? I can't just say to Josh Aaron, hey, listen, this guy just put on this, and that's why he's going fast.
Right.
They can ask, hey, has anybody run a 3? And I'll say, yeah, I got some fast guys on a 3. We should look at it. I think we should look at it. And then they'll be like, okay. So yeah, we kind of eliminated that, because we don't want we don't even want the perception of that, of any favoritism or anything like that. They can look at my notes at any time, and that's all uploaded lifetime. And yeah, we have a pretty good group. Yeah, there's none of that.
My other question as it pertains to that is like, when it comes down to those decisions like rain tire, slick, do you get involved in that decision making, or is that purely a team rider preference?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, the rider will do it, so we'll advise as best we can, but the number one thing is, the rider has to go look at it. I think that's one of the worst things, is when they're sitting there asking other riders, or asking somebody that's just been on the track before, and they don't go out and look at it. So in the end, it is the rider's decision. No matter what, you always got to let the rider pick, unless they absolve you from any responsibility. I mean, they have to co-sign 100%, and then you can make a decision. But that's a team thing. And most of the top teams already know what they're going to do. Um, but for some of the smaller teams, we'll kind of push them in a direction that we think is safe. But again, it kind of goes back to race direction as well. I mean, There's not much we can do. If it's raining and there's, a lot of standing water, we have rains. That's it. But that doesn't mean the rains are going to be able to cope with all the water sometimes. And that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue, because even in like Formula One or something, they'll stop a session. And if they only get 3 minutes of an hour program, that's okay, because race direction says the conditions have become unsafe. The track's not draining fast enough. So that's where, even if we do everything right, sometimes you have to save the riders from themselves, because they will not pull in. They're not going to do it, especially if they're leading a race. They're not going to put their hand up. They're going to try to win that race, even when the conditions are, less than ideal for the rain tire.
Tony, you talked about how you've been working with the Ducati team for a couple of years. And I remember that when Danilo Petrucci came on that team, you went over early, in the preseason and went to Portimao with him. And of course, he had a lot of talk about the fact that he was on a different brand of tire than Dunlop, and, how he could adapt to it, and the front tire and this, that, and the other thing. And you were over there with him when he tested. And, it turns out that, you got Loris Baz. I haven't heard Loris Baz say one thing at all ever about, oh, I'm not used to this tire, or getting used to this tire, or whatever. It doesn't seem like it's a factor. Maybe it was more of a thing with Danilo than it was or is with Loris. It doesn't seem within that team that that's even a conversation anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think with, obviously two different riders, right? Two different riders. And Danilo, that guy's an incredible rider. When you can't give the guy enough credit, honestly. He knows what he wants, and he expects certain things, and he's pushing his hardest. The guy is incredible. It's not one lap, I'll take it easy. That guy's pushing from the moment he goes out there, and he can get tires to work that other people can't, which was super impressive. Like, it doesn't matter if we would go with the hard compound for him, where other people be like, they just can't get it in the working range. They can't get enough heat in the tire. And he would do things to make it work. And so, yeah, I think he was critical, but it was his first year as well. I think what the difference with Baz is he did a year on the tires. They're not that much different than what he rode the first time. And then I think he's gotten more testing as well. So I think that's why he's a little less vocal. He understands him a little bit now. But yeah, Danilo, I think that his first year was, had he come back for a second year, I don't think he would have been that critical about the stuff. And we probably would have had more tests, because that's what was definitely helping. I actually went to Portimao and then went to a Misano test as well later in that same year. And he was getting it. And I think he wanted to come back, but I don't know what the problems were there. But no, he's an incredible rider, and he's doing well where he's going. So, or I'm sorry, where he is. So yeah, hats off to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sean.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well,
no, you go.
Okay. I was just going to say, well, continuing this one, I don't know. This is something I'm not even sure. I've never really been able to get an answer from a rider, a straight answer about this. And I don't know, Tony, if it's something can be described. This thing about it's not, not being used to a tire. Of course, these guys are at the upper echelon of grip and lean angle and all that stuff. So of course they're going to notice that. But my street bike, I do use Dunlops. I've had bikes with Metzlers on them. I just ride it. I don't notice any difference at all, except for how many miles I can get out of the tire. So I don't even get any of that stuff about different brands and everything. Can you explain that? Does each company, is it just the characteristics are somewhat different?
Well, yeah. For sure, it's in the racing side. Well, I'm sorry, you suffer from. I'm sorry, you suffer from the same thing I do. When I did, and sorry on a sidebar, but at Yamaha, they would let you take a lot of bikes and say, look, even though you're not on the test team, just try them out, try this bike. And they always said, we don't want you to do it anymore, because you have you got a $2 ass. Everything is fine. Like, I could never find anything wrong with any of the motorcycles. They were fine. They all did everything well. So, but yeah, I think when you get to race tires, yes, definitely different philosophy, different DNA. One of the easiest things is we're a Kevlar company, right? So all of our tires that we make here in the United States, in Buffalo, New York, and everything we race on is Kevlar. Other competitors, they use steel. and that, that's kind of part of their DNA. That's we feel it's an advantage to use Kevlar. It's hard because you're competing with the military and a lot of other industries for Kevlar, so the price goes up and down. But we just absorb that. And then obviously it's characteristics of the tires. Some of them want a very stiff carcass, some of them want a very soft carcass, and they don't rely on air to keep the shape of the tire. So that's kind of why we can get away with a lot of low pressure, but some of them actually require a lot of air because the components, it won't hold its shape without it. So yeah, it's a lot of the DNA of different manufacturers and the philosophy, and they've got a lot of data and experience building that kind of tire. So yeah, each one is a little different. And I mean, we can go on and on. I mean, from bead design to the amount of rubber or amount of tread that's on the tire, how thick it is, multi-compounds, cap, base, there's a lot to it. And everybody has their own, like I said, their own philosophy and DNA to the thing. So, but I'm not surprised that you can't feel the difference on the street, because I can't either.
I got a $2 ass.
I got a $2.
It's funny because the press intros I would go to with Cycle News, I mean, they'd send us all over the world. We'd ride these badass bikes, and you'd show up sometimes and you'd have your own technician. Well, my technician was like the most bored guy in the paddock, right? Because I'm like, oh, what am I going to have him do, right? Unless you're riding that bike to the ultimate maximum of what it can do, it's kind of silly to make changes here and there. But it's I guess I got a $2 ass too. Okay, so back, obviously it was super bikes at Daytona for a long time, but I always remember for Jim Allen and the other tire technicians and anybody who worked for a tire company at that time, it was like sleepless nights, right? Because it's just a scary place, and it puts a lot of wear and tear on tires. Is that still the same, even though it's super sport? Is it still a bit of a worry?
Not so much for super sport. I'll tell you, it's pretty manageable just because of the speeds. I'm never going to say we have a complete handle on Daytona. It's just the minute you think you have it and you take your attention off it, it's going to get you. So I think we have a pretty good idea, and we have some countermeasures. And it is all about the speed. I think when I try to describe to people, when we have local overheating, people don't understand the overheating. It's pretty generic for all brands. I can't speak for everybody, but basically, you're trying to, the rubber or the tread comes off the ground, tries to expand. It's trying to throw it off, so it kind of grows, and then it gets smashed again, and then it grows again. And so you're constantly just sitting there, manipulating this tread, and it's just a friction. It gets so hot that heat has to go somewhere. And if it can't dissipate, at the rest of the tire, you'll get these local overheating spots, and, it start to get soft and chunk out, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. The tire's communicating to you, hey, I have a problem. So that's one thing about Daytona. We always tell everybody, listen, if you feel a vibration and it's getting worse with speed, come in. It's not going to get better. It's not going to fix itself because it's doing exactly what it should do. But if it happens quickly or over a big span of the tread, then yeah, you could have a failure, because then you don't have the tread to protect the carcass anymore. So any small stone or anything, a rumble strip, any kind of edge could puncture the tire, and you'll lose air quickly. So I'm not going to say that we have a handle on it for super sport. We feel pretty confident there. The biggest concern is the baggers. That's a whole different animal, because they're almost going as fast as super bikes. I mean, they're going 190 miles an hour. And they weigh 620, I think 620 or is it 640, something like that.
620,
without,
right on the nose.
Without the rider. So they're more of a concern. And so we're almost to the point to where we're constantly just keeping our eye on that. Not that we've taken our eye off the super sport, but baggers are requiring more attention. And if we ever had Superbike back, I think the baggers are making us a better company for that. But they're a big part of the show, and the whole unique challenge. The weight is the biggest part of it.
Well, is it accurate also to say that Daytona is a big compromise, because you can't give them the grip that they would like on the infield and still have the tire hard enough to withstand the speeds and everything that goes on with the banking?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always on the left-hand side. The drive grip you're always going to sacrifice drive grip on the left. So for our Daytona tires, we have a kind of a 3-zone compound. So on the working side, which is the banking side, you'll have a good strip of, so for example, what won the race this year was our R2, R5 setup. Pardon me. And so it'll be R2 all the way leaned over on the banking side, and then you have a strip of 5 over center, and then you'll have 2 again. And so, you know, we don't even sell 2 in regular competition, but that's it. The non-working side, the non-banking, the non-banking side can take quite a bit of abuse. So it's just, you have a lot more grip through the chicane, through the horseshoes, and then at full lean rolling the corner, that little strip of 2 also helps. But when you're on the drive grip, it's 2 things. You have a harder compound, and then we have a different gauge there too. We have a little less rubber there. So it's a kind of a unique animal on that one. But basically the same format goes for the baggers, but yeah, it is much harder because they just have so much horsepower, no TC, right? So they can't kill power.
Right.
It's all in the right hand. So yeah, it's a compromise, but I think they're okay with it. I mean, it's one race of the year, and people come to see it, and that. But we're trying. We have a couple of options this year that we're hoping will improve the show there. But yeah, it is always a compromise. Yes.
Wow, Tony, that's crazy. So I want to talk about that a little bit. On a single, let's just talk about the rear tire. Well, no, let's talk about one tire. It doesn't really matter. On a single tire, you have different bands of compounds of rubber that perform different things, provide different advantages depending on how far you're leaning that motorcycle over. That's incredible, but it's a single tire. And when you look at that tire, I've looked at them. I can't tell where the one strip, to your point, ends and begins. Do they? And they all attached to each other. They all look the same. There's you can't make a separation, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, once they're worn, you might see it, because obviously the hard compound, the very soft compound, you'll see maybe a line will develop between the 2 compounds, but it's so minor and so small that it doesn't affect, they can't feel that. But you will see it after it's run. And then maybe sometimes on a brand new tire, you can see maybe a little different colors between the 2, but it's hard to pick out when they're new. But when they're used, you can kind of see the split line just on that banking side. Over center, you can't really see that.
I want to go back to the reins a minute, because Dan Argano was up. I work with Ron and with the VIPs presenting to them. I'm sure you've been up there too, Tony. Yep. So Dan, and we did a little bit of a Q&A on Sunday regarding the rain. And one of the things that Dan talked about is how amazing the rain tires are. And I remember, and I'm sure you do too, back to Danilo Petrucci for a minute, at MotoAmerica that year, I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, but I think it was Sunday. We had a rain race, and they raced on reins, and I always do highest trap speed, all that kind of stuff. And Danilo had the highest trap speed of any motorcycle in any class that weekend. And it was the final lap of the race. I think it was the final lap he ran all weekend, because I think it was a Sunday race on a rain tire. And the rain tire, I think it was almost the slick in the middle. So, yeah. I mean, those tires, that's a testament to how well those tires do that job. Do you recall that was the situation that he did that? Were you guys aware of that too?
Nope. To be honest, I mean, at that point, you're just trying to, and I think if I recall correctly on that, it was kind of a drying track.
Yes.
And so, when at a track like that, or maybe Coda, or maybe like if we went to Atlanta, or maybe VIR, someplace with a big straightaway, if it's a drying track, then yeah, we have cause for concern there, because again, the riders won't stop. Exactly what you said. The center of the tire is probably gone, and he's going as fast as he can, trying to win a race, and just like all of them. So in those situations, I think I spend more time in communication with MotoAmerica. And we, look, if we start seeing 2 or 3 riders come in with overheated or risk of puncturing the tire or losing air, then we'll have to stop the race. So a lot of times I'm more concerned with that in the drying conditions. If it was full wet, then yeah, maybe I would have been aware of that. But those are the challenges we face. Is like I said, is sometimes you got to save the riders from themselves, because they just have one job, not trying to win that race, and they have no idea. They're gonna try to mitigate it and manage it as best they can, but they really are relying on us. And that was something left over from Goodyear, is we got to protect our good name. And so that's the number one thing that I think about. I can take the criticism and any kind of fallout, that's fine. But we got to protect our good name and we got to protect the riders. So luckily we haven't had any issues. But yeah, that I wasn't really aware of that, but I'm not surprised. Like I said, he's an incredible rider and incredible talent.
Yeah, and I mean, just to underscore it, the tale I tell about it is the rain tire did its job. It did what it was supposed to do. Danilo turned a rain tire kind of in a slick, and it was a pretty darn good slick for him to still go make, have that highest trap speed. So that shows that tire is pretty incredible what you can do with those.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we stick with it. It's a I know sometimes people, they're critical that they want maybe a softer one or whatever, but yeah, we just stick with this one because 9 times out of 10, I shouldn't say it like that. It could happen where they'll put the wrong one on or they'll pick the wrong one, and then we're always going to get the blame for that, right? I mean, the people that get, no matter what, you have a great race, it's everybody else. Thank you, and thanks, mom and dad and the team. And you have a bad race, it was a terrible tire. I had that race once, so we're always, like Keith McCarty used to say, he said, look, people have a gun pointed at you. Don't put bullets in it, so, but we're used to that. We know we're going to get that criticism, and, that it is what it is.
So Tony, one of the things, you guys are, it's always onward with technology or what you're doing with tires and all that kind of stuff, but we're seeing some changes down the road with, well, we don't know if the displacement is going to change with Superbike here, as dictated by the FIM. We hear about, of course, electric bikes all the time. We've got Stefano Mesa, who's racing that Eva Rebel. I want to ask you about that bike, and I don't think he has a technician dedicated to that bike, but does that bike wear tires any differently than an internal combustion engine motorcycle?
I don't think so. When he raced it at Daytona the first time, we had some questions about it because it's heavy, and I think the weight was more concern than the power because like anything, eventually you just spin the tire. Power is really not that big a deal because you're not going anywhere. You're just spinning the tire, so you have to roll off and kind of manage that on the throttle, or a TC will kick in. We were more concerned with the front too because of how much energy is going to get dropped into the thing because it has no engine braking, I think, or some of the electric bikes don't have engine braking. So when you roll off, it really puts a lot of load on the front tire. But luckily it's been pretty good. We haven't really had any issues. He runs the same exact stuff that we run for Super Sport and Superbike. And once the baggers came into play and they're so heavy, we were like, okay, I think this electric bike, we're not going to need to worry about that one too much anymore. So, but again, yeah, I mean, if you have too much power, it just spins, and that's not going to help the lap time.
I don't have much more. Sean, what about you?
Couple more. I want to touch on something that I haven't noticed in a couple of years. Back when we were doing Super Stock 1000, and I remember this from Westby's team because I was, doing PR for them. They were having a problem with the, I think it was the OEM. Well, they had to have OEM wheels, and the tire was spinning on the rim, and they would put, I don't know, it seemed like they were putting some kind of gritty tape on them. They were filing grooves in it. Nobody was using, that I know of, screws like back what Kenny Roberts used to do and those guys back when they raced Daytona. But that's because obviously the air pressure in the tire is pretty low. That doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. I haven't seen that happen, although I do see that the teams put marks on the wheel and on the tire to see how much the wheel moves, and it does still move a little bit at the end of a race or a session. Is that still a thing, Tony? Or is it kind of changed with what your tires are doing lately?
No, it definitely was a thing. So we did two things to mitigate that. We used a different lube, kind of a slip tack, I think is what they call it. So as it gets hot, it gets tacky, and so that was a big difference. We changed to that. We also kind of changed the hairspray. That was kind of a thing for a while there. We were doing that, but the slip tack seems to work pretty good. And then it really was kind of an OEM specific issue, right? Certain brands spin more than the others, and the other. So I think they got better at it too. And then, yeah, they were adding some grit. Some of the teams would add so much grit that the tire wouldn't seat. I mean, you just couldn't get one. It was just tearing the beads. It was so aggressive. Some of this, you know, they were probably mixing paint and some kind of sandpaper or sand or something. But so I think it took a while for everybody to get their head around how much grit you can put on there, how much of the sand paint mixture you can put on there, still have the tire seat and not spin. But I think us using the different lube helped as well, the tire lube. So I think that did help. And you know, you bring up a good point with the slip, is you know, some people think that the tire will spin all at once, and it just doesn't. It kind of crab walks. It's side to side. And
Wow.
so, you know, we'll tell people, look, it could do that, and you might get a little bit of a vibration at the end, but all of a sudden it goes away because the other side catches up. Now the
Mhm.
tire's round again. And so it's kind of it's something that we don't like, and we'd like to try to get it under control, but it happens to every tire brand. I mean, there's not really much we can do besides rim locks. And I think we have control of it now. We have better control of it for sure. You can see on the podium, we don't get a lot of slip. Superbike, of course, is way better. Because they have the grid is kind of professionally put on from the tire, I'm sorry, from the wheel manufacturer. So they know exactly you know, how aggressive they can do it, and how thick they can put it on. And they have I'm sure they have you know, data that they can fall back on. So it's really good for Superbike. But yes, Super Sport and Super Stock, we see that a lot. And of course, Super Stock has a lot of power. So
Okay, and the other thing, your guys mount the tire on the wheel, and I guess they air it up or whatever. And I see this happen. I don't know if, well, you could tell us the process. I think you guys don't put nitrogen in, but I know that some teams put nitrogen in. So they'll take the tire back and essentially deflate what they've already done. And I've even seen some of these guys they have one of these balancing, you know, the spools and the rod and all that. And they're balancing the tire after you guys get done. And I'm like, well, Dunlop already did that, you know? What goes on after you guys do it? And why is that process that way?
yeah, I mean, and that's a good question. So if we're going to talk about the nitrogen first,
Yeah.
The nitrogen just basically there to limit the rise, right? So no matter we have a pretty sophisticated air drying system on our truck. I mean, it's pretty good, but it is just air. And no matter what, there is moisture inside the tire sometimes. I mean, it's out there, and once you compress it, you'll start to see it. So we've seen rise up to 3 to 4 pounds just using air, even though we're using our dry air. If you can purge that out a couple of times and put nitrogen in there, that reduces that maybe to 2 or 3 pound rise. And then it never gets, you can keep putting heat in it and it just stops. So like we talked before, if you increase the PSI by 3, you know, you increase pressure by 3 PSI, now we're losing 15 millimeters of contact patch. That's a lot. So that's one of the reasons they do that, just to minimize the rise, and then you're going to keep the shape of the tire. As far as the rebalancing, that's pretty subjective because our balancers are, you know, we have ceramic bearings. It's the same ones that we've used for a long time. And yeah, they'll go back and a lot of them just double check. But sometimes they'll go ahead and take the weights off and put their own on, and then they'll bring it back and we'll have a discrepancy back and forth. And that's okay. That doesn't happen very often. It's maybe 1 or 2. I mean, we think we're right. We do, I don't know, over 1,000 tires a weekend. When we did Moto 2, it was the same exact stuff. I remember once someone made a comment to me. They said, well, you know, you don't have the same quality personnel or something or equipment as they do in Moto 2. And I said, well, okay, every time Moto 2 comes, who do you think does that? We do. And I've never had one come back for out of balance. So again, we think we're right. And another thing people don't know is that every balance station has a different colored marker or paint pen. And so sometimes, yeah, we could have a stuck bearing. There could be an issue, or maybe we have a balancer that's not paying attention. I mean, it could be anything, but it's going to be a bad bearing or a roller or something. And if we start to see, oh, hey, we have a lot of comebacks with yellow, okay, check that equipment and replace that balancer, you know, something like that. So there's a lot of things going on in the background that people don't know about, but yeah, some guys they think that they're going to get it a little bit better, and that's okay. You know, we're happy with it. Quality control's been done, and once it's out, it's out.
Okay, this last one. Every team or rider will tell you, me, whoever, you know this better than anybody, Tony, that the biggest expense, or at least one of the biggest expenses during the year, is their tire budget, the amount of money they spend on tires. So they buy tires from you guys. You guys mount the tires.
Mhm.
They kind of borrow those tires. They don't keep them always. They give them back to you, I think, and you guys
No.
leave. Okay, tell us about that, because
No,
you
no,
guys
and
have a. Okay,
yeah,
good.
I'm glad you hit on that. Yeah, so there's two things there. So if you race MotoAmerica, so let's say the retail price, whatever it is it's retail, and the reason I'm not saying is because I don't know it, to be honest, and shame on me, but whatever it is. So if you race MotoAmerica, you don't buy them at the regular retail pricing. We have a special pricing to make it even. You know, we're trying to get you to come to MotoAmerica. We're trying to get the club racers or amateurs or whatever that can qualify. We want you to do it, and we want to make it affordable for you. So yeah, the tires cost less than MotoAmerica. So yes, 100%, you can take them with you. We encourage you. It's easier for us, so we don't have to come back and scrap them here at the factory. We say there's marker, chalk, something there. Write your name on your tire, put save on it. I recommend you just wait for it. I mean, sometimes people will, they'll leave it and then they'll come back 2 days later and say, "Where's my tire? I put save on it." Well, we scrap them every night. We can't hang on to every tire for 3 days. So, but yeah, they'll go ahead and they'll put their name or the race number or something on there, and come back that same day, identify, and they get to keep every single tire. Yeah, we don't, we don't want them, because at that point we'll have to scrap them. So that just costs us more money.
Okay, and that's the point I was getting at, Tony. I want people to understand, in this day and age when we're thinking about, sustainability and green, and all that stuff. And you touched on it in the beginning of this conversation. The tires that you take back from riders and you take back, there are no gigantic piles of tires at the plant in Buffalo. You guys responsibly take care of those tires. You mentioned it before, they use for other byproducts, but when you take them back from a rider, what does a rider do with that tire? I mean, we don't want them to put it in the environment either. It's almost better to go back to you guys, even though it's a pain in the butt for you to do it.
Yeah, if there's still life in that tire and they're going to use it to start off something else like that, and then hopefully, at that point when they take it to a club race or they're done with it, then they have a responsible tire vendor that will dispose of it. They'll take it to a place and pay the recycling fee. But yeah, I don't think they take them if there's not any use. If they're not useful anymore, if they're completely worn out, yeah, they're going to leave the thing. Or if it's got a lot of heavy graining or something like that, then yeah, they'll just leave it for us, which is fine. But yeah, there could be some more life in that tire. A lot of times, I get guys that bring brand new tires just because we'll change from race to race. So say like Mid Ohio was more of our harder compound stuff, but if we were going to say we're going to Brainerd, we wouldn't offer the hard stuff. We'd have some softer options. So they still have brand new hard ones mounted. We'll dump those off, put the right stuff on there, but they won't come back for that one. I mean, I see brand new tires left all the time at the service, and these are the same people that complain about the tire prices, but they just don't come back and get them. I mean, it's sometimes they don't write their name on them, and I don't know what to do with them. We just kind of put them in the truck. I mean, it's one of those things, and then we give them away. We don't anything that we get like that, we can't know if it's been on a warmer. We don't know what happened to it, so we'll give it to one of our sponsored riders or somebody that's going to a club race or something.
Are all the tires that you guys provide on a race weekend specifically intended to be on a tire warmer? Do you have to have them put them on a tire warmer before they're used?
I mean, I would say yes. The only one that we don't is Royal Enfield, the Build Train Race. They use Q5s, which, the tire warmers are probably going to help, maybe 20, 30 minutes on those. But yeah, the slick tires, yes, absolutely. I mean, they're made to work in those conditions. So when we probe the tires, like Paul said earlier, we'll constantly probe. We're looking to see if we have any overheating, or are we in the working range. So our working range is anywhere from 100C to 130C, somewhere in there. We want to see the tire in that range at the rear, and the front probably like 85 to 90, 85 to 95, something like that. If we're getting complaints about grip and we're probing and we're in the 80s on the rear, well, we just don't have enough temperature in the tire. So So yeah, they're meant to work in that range. And the tire warmers, typically they'll set them around 90 C, so they never even get them close to operating temperature. But yes, because they will be like ice. I've seen people almost crash straight up and down on a cold tire. So yeah, tire warmers are a must, I would say.
Okay. And there in the 10 years we've had Moto America, we had a time period where we had Super Pole, which was, I loved it so much. It was so
Mhm.
awesome. We still, I want to clarify this. We still have Super Pole. They use Q tires within the realm of that final qualifying or
Yep.
qualifying session. So we still have Super Pole. It's just not designated. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. And
Okay.
typically you'll know it because it'll have a different color band on the side. And that changes from time to time, because say like for Coda this weekend, we are gonna, or the next race, we're gonna use real qualifiers. So that'll be an R0, but places that are really, really abrasive or a brand new racetrack, we'll use an R3 because we don't want the thing, we kind of want you to get 2 laps on the thing. So if you get blocked or something, someone's touring and your first lap gets compromised, you can slow down a little bit, get yourself together and try it again for that next lap. So places like Coda, places like when it was brand new, Road America, we used a 3, which would be a soft race tire, and that was the qualifier. So when we're up against something like that, we'll try to mitigate that and try to make it easier. But yeah, it'll have a different color on there. So typically a white or a yellow, and then you know that they're on the qualifier.
Okay. One more quick one, Paul.
Mhm.
One
No
quick
problem.
one. And this might not be a quick answer because, I think I understand what it is, but I want Tony to tell us what it is. Tony, what's cold tearing in a tire?
Yeah, and that's a good question because I get that a lot, and people will describe it with a ton of different descriptions, right? So a lot of people will say it's graining, cold tearing, and basically what that is when you heat the tire with the tire warmer, it basically saturates that whole tread all the way to the carcass. I mean, you were really close to being uniform on the temperature. Once you take off, you start to accelerate the heat, on the heat accelerates and generates a lot more heat on the top, on the surface. And it takes a little bit of time for that to equalize to the carcass. When the tire's brand new right out of the warmer and they go, we don't have a problem. It's when you come in, you talk for a minute, maybe even as short as 2 minutes, you just maybe download real quick or make a suspension adjustment. The top of the tread cools off. And then when you go ahead and take off and you're trying to push real hard, it starts to tear because there's too much of a difference in temperature between the top layer and the carcass. And so that's when you start to see a lot of the cold tearing. The harder compounds deal with that better. The softer compounds they're gonna suffer. So yeah, it's always best if you come in, you're gonna make a change, come in hot, don't tour on that cool off lap, come in as quick as you can, that's safe. Put the warmer on right away and then start talking about it. And that will help control some of that. But that just doesn't happen. You'll start to see the banding and you'll start to see some of that graining. It kind of starts to rough up a little bit. But once it happens, you're not going to be able to fix it. It's that's why a lot of the Yamaha is one of the teams. They'll kind of start their weekend on the harder side, get their race set up and make any suspension changes, any TC, because they know that the harder compounds are gonna kind of deal with that cold tearing a little bit more. They're going to be better suited for it. And then as the track temperature goes up, that helps too. In the afternoon, they'll start throwing in the soft stuff. And that's kind of been there. Hopefully, I'm not giving anything away there, but that's kind of their program, and it's been working really well for them. So, but that's basically the cold tearing. It's just the difference between the surface temp and the carcass.
Okay, so this almost hour was brought to you by a tiny portion of Tony Romo's brain. We'll have to get more of Tony Romo's brain at another time because there's a lot up there. So
yeah,
yeah. Really, thank you, Tony. There's so much to it. I mean, for something that people look at and go, well, okay, it's a rubber tire. There's so much to it. It's really terrific to get this info from you. We'll definitely have you on again.
Well, I appreciate the time, and I just want to say real quick, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I know we went long, but
That's
this
okay.
wouldn't be possible if without it's kind of a dream, right? I mean, you think about it. I mean, whether you're patriotic or it depends on how patriotic you are, but it's a real pleasure to be able to be in American Series MotoAmerica and be on American made tires, and that's true. But we couldn't do it without all the men and women that work here. I mean, I can't even describe to you some of the conditions they got to come in to drive to work. And they are so proud. And when if there's a question, it always amazes me when I walk through this place and then they'll stop me and they'll be like, "Hey, Tony, what happened at the last race?" Or, "Hey, I heard we had a problem." Or I say, no, that happened in Europe, but it was a Dunlop tire. And I said, "Yeah, but that wasn't here. That wasn't our problem." "Oh, okay, great." And they really take pride in it. And so it is a real pleasure. But it wouldn't be possible without everybody, from the design team to the manufacturing to everybody that just keeps this place going. And they really take a lot of pride. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and it's a dream for me, and I'm really happy that I could do it, and hopefully we continue on.
That's great, Tony. Well said. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Tony, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I also want to tell fans, like, one of the most entertaining things they can do at the race is if they happen to get to the Dunlop truck when they're unloading or loading tires, and they have this crazy like assembly line of people rolling tires and they're flipping over perfectly and everything's great. It's like, it's a lot of fun to watch. And you just like, I don't know if they're trained to do that or what, but they certainly know what they're doing.
Yeah, like circus animals,
Yeah.
Once you get them trained up, they're fun. No, it is fun. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we welcome anybody. Please come in and you can ask questions, and we'll always have somebody there to answer any of your questions. So yeah, I mean, we encourage people to come by the service, of course.
All right, awesome. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, Tony.
All right,
Hey,
thanks,
Tony,
guys.
thank you.
Thank you.